I'm Keith McDaniel. We're doing family dynamics and birth order in this particular session, and this comes into play in the workplace and relationships. And it's important to know that because it's important to know where we got the characteristics that we have. And typically all of those come from our family of origin, the family we grew up in. And as you start to think and talk about that, you will realize what those dynamics are. And those are very important to know because until we are aware of them, we can't do anything about them. And they can really impact us in the workplace with relationships, marriage relationships. But the way that I talk about it most of the time is in work relationships because I'm generally working with work groups. And so it's very important to know so that we can relate to other people that we work with maybe in a different way, or to know that they're not necessarily who we might think they are that came from the family we grew up in, because obviously they didn't, but they may have traits like those folks, and so it's just very important. What I normally do when I'm doing this is I do what's called a genogram. And what I would do if I was working, say, with the person here behind the camera, I would draw your family. Your mom and dad, your brothers and sisters, and then I would take it back another generation. And what I'm looking for when I do that are patterns in those relationships. In other words, if you're the firstborn, you're typically going to be more out there, aggressive, that kind of thing. If you are the middleborn, you typically will marry onlys, and that's what happened in my case. I'm an only child and I married a middle child. And the other thing to look for is that the children who are closest to home are generally not the ones who are closest to the family. The ones who are closest to the family, mom and dad and grandparents, what have you, they typically move away because it's too close for them. They need some distance. And so that's something else to keep in mind. The other thing you look for in the genogram is alcoholism. Typically, alcoholism will skip a generation. So if you've got alcoholism in your grandparents' family or your granddad, look for it in not your generation, but maybe in the next generation. The other thing we always look for are suicides. Because if there's been a suicide in the family, the message that sends to the family is that's an acceptable way to leave the family. So it's very important to look at those kinds of issues in the genogram. The other thing that happens once people learn about this and learn about their family is what we do unconsciously, of course, is we will recreate our family of origin in the workplace. Think about that. Think about the people you work with, and then think about who they might represent in your family. And that boss that you might have trouble with might remind you of that aunt that you never liked. So if that's the case, then you need to get conscious of that and work on that and say, now, that's not really my aunt, that's my boss or whoever. But it's very important to know who those people are so that when you're working with them, you can be aware that those dynamics still affect you and they will affect you forever. So those are things to help you understand and to work with yourself and with others. I'd like to invite anybody who's listening or has heard any of these videos to know that if you would like to come see me privately, you can do that through the Provider Wellbeing Network. You could call Dr. Jerry, who is a psychiatrist, and he can make the referral, but you can call me directly. And my number is 910-690-7743. And I have a private office, very confidential. Nobody will know you're coming and that you came unless you tell them. So if you listen to any of these, or for any other reason you feel like you'd like to talk to a counselor, please don't hesitate to call, and it will cost you nothing.